When you first begin a project, there are a lot of unknowns. One of the unknowns that I had, and I'm hoping you had as well, and that's why you're watching this video, is just how you got your project set up and how you actually run the code. So for me, quick reminder, I am running a mean stack application, which is a Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. I have multiple GitHub repos. When you first begin a project, you're probably going to have one, and I'll share with you why I'm doing two and why it's beneficial. My Angular app exists in its own GitHub repo, and my API server exists in its own GitHub repo as well. Now the MongoDB is local, the actual database and all of the collections, as they call it, they're all stored locally, and you connect to Mongo via my server code in the MyApp API repo. So you have two different repos, and the Mongo database is the third element, however, it exists in your API server code. Each project has its own folder in my local folder structure. So I have a Macbook, and each repo, so the Angular app and API app, which is essentially what I call it, have their own directories in my MacBook. This makes it easier to keep them separate. Within the root folder, because reminder, it is in its own directory, I run ngserve to start the app. This is essentially its own app. And the default port for Angular is 4200, so when this app has built and is being served by the Angular server, then you can access your app in your browser by going to localhost 4200. If you have a MacBook, you're going to be using terminal, or likely using terminal. And if you have a Windows, I'm not too sure, but you're probably going to be using some type of command line similar to terminal. So my Angular app, my API app, and then my MongoDB, they're all going to exist in three different tabs. I know this is very beginner, and if you already know this stuff, it may seem like too much of a beginner stuff. But if you're just starting your project and you are a little confused on how to get going, I hope that this information is exactly what you're looking for. Now onto the Node.js Express app. So within the root folder of this directory, I run npm start. This is found in the package.json. You can set it in the scripts. This is the npm start is the generic, like the default for you, so that's why I run it. Now I also added Nodemon. That's for another video. If you want to look into Nodemon, it runs Node. I would highly recommend that. So my npm start runs the command nodemon app.js. My app.js file has my server code. If you need help on that, feel free to leave a question below in the comment section. So the default port for Node and Express apps is port 3000. So you can access it by going to that in the browser. But remember, your app is actually existing on port 4200. That's where the Angular app exists, and it's going to be making calls to your API server on port 3000, but you won't actually see that in the browser. Similar to the Angular app, this app also has its own project directory within my local folder structure and runs on its own tab within terminal. And lastly, MongoDB. So I can open a new tab in terminal. So, reminder just to make sure you have it. My Angular app, my API app, both exist in their own terminals. Their servers are running separately. And then the third tab in terminal will be for handling the database. The code runs on the default port of 27017. You don't need to set this or anything. I have Mongoose, so my command is just mongod in the root folder of the API server code, and it runs the Mongo database. And just a reminder that the database exists locally, and you can access all of the database data in your terminal. Another thing that may come up in your journey to start your own project is node modules and package.json. Node modules is the folder that holds all of the code for your dependencies for your Node project. And the Angular app will also have its own node modules. Now, I've seen instances where you only have one. I actually do not have an opinion or an idea on what best practice it is for where you need to store your node modules, if one is better than two, or if each project has its own. Now, I will say, since my app exists in two separate applications, each one needs their own node modules folder. So if you're going to set up your project similar to mine, you're going to have each application, so the Angular app and the API app, will each have its own node modules folder and package.json file. And if you need help with those two, please feel free to leave a comment below. That is the end of this presentation. Real quick, thanks so much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment, or if you want me to cover anything in particular, please leave a comment, because that's how I'll base the future videos, just so I can help you out.